this video, I'm going to break down two kind of unusual clips of John Petrucci practicing guitar, and I'm going to point out a few of the more quirky things that he does while practicing that you can very easily apply into your practice sessions so you can start improving much faster as a result. Clips like this, where you can see John play the solo to the song The Gift of Music off of the Astonishing album, which is an awesome album, by the way, I liked it a lot. And clips like this one, where you can see John warming up with this moderately fast scale sequence filmed with a very, very weird close-up view by none other than Jordan Rudess himself. Thank you, Jordan, for doing that for us. Now, there's a lot of details going on here in both of these clips that are very easy to miss if you don't know what specifically to look for. And the best part is that this is John practicing for himself and by himself. This is not him speaking kind of broadly to some general audience in an instructional video where he doesn't really know who's watching and what they need to work on. This is him trying to get better at the specific things he wants to improve at. So those are the things that are clearly working. Now, of course, I'm not John Petrucci. I cannot speak for John Petrucci, but I do specialize in helping guitar players practice better and get better results out of their practice time. So I think I have a very good sense of what John is doing here and why, and I want to break down those things for you so you can benefit from them in your practicing as well. So first, take a look at this. This is John playing a moderately fast scale sequence, and it sounds like he's playing one note per click to the metronome. What's unusual about this is that if you were my guitar student and I was teaching you how to practice better and how to build your guitar speed, this would be something I'd specifically tell you not to do. I tell almost everybody not to practice lead guitar in quarter notes or one note per click, and instead play your licks in the note values they're intended to be played in. So triplets, 3 notes per beat, or 16th notes, 4 notes per beat, and so on. For most people, when they practice lead guitar in quarter notes, what happens is their notes sound choppy because they stop the sound of each note a split second before they're supposed to get to the second note and line it up with the metronome click precisely, and so they have these sloppy gaps between each note that really sound bad. Not to mention that it's simply hard to pay attention to the timing of every single note as you're lining up with the click. It's really mentally draining to do this right. So whenever I hear guitar players talk about building speed at some absurd metronome tempos, like 480 beats per minute or something, I tell them to divide that tempo by, say, 3 or 4, and then practice depending on what the note values are in the lick. So if the metronome is clicking in quarter notes at 120, you're going to be playing 3 notes per click, or 4 notes per click, or 6 notes per click, depending on what the rhythm of the lick is. And this way, you're learning to play in time while also playing independently of the metronome. You're syncing up the first note of each beat with the click, and then the other notes, they simply follow along and you are forced to make them in time without having to sync up every single note to the click. This is a very important and very useful real-life guitar playing skill to have that some guitar players simply never develop. Now, to be clear, you can absolutely still make your lead guitar playing sound good even when you're playing just quarter notes or 1 note per click at some fast tempos, or at least fast by most people's standards. It simply takes a lot more brain power and a lot more control to do this well, and it's not the best way to push your absolute top-end speed, which is how many people try to do it. That's why I don't recommend this for most guitar players who are focused specifically on trying to push their speed. But back to Petrucci. Why is he practicing in basically the opposite way to everything I just said? Does that mean that he's right and I'm wrong? No. But it does mean that there's a couple of things going on here that are very easy to miss. The first of which is that John is playing well below his top-end maximum speed. He's clearly well within his threshold of control, as I like to say. And because he is not pushing his top-end speed, he's focusing on something I call horizontal progress, which is instead of pushing your speed to the edge of your ability where you're always 1 or 2 BPM away from everything just coming crashing down like a house of cards, he's focusing on playing at some moderate tempo and really trying to master that tempo, make every element of his playing sound great at that tempo. This goes back to my earlier point where I said you absolutely can make your playing sound great even when you're playing 1 note per click at some a moderate or higher than moderate tempo if you have enough unused capacity in your brain to focus on those things. But if you're always playing on the edge, if you're always on the edge of your threshold, then it's very hard to do that. And this is how most guitar players, unfortunately, try to use this practice approach. They play one note per click at or near the top of their speed, and then it doesn't work because they run into the problems I mentioned earlier. And here, John compensates for the difficulty of syncing up every note to every click of the metronome by simply turning the metronome tempo down, where it's easy enough for him to do, but still challenging enough when focusing on that specific area of his playing that he's trying to improve in this moment. Also notice that John's metronome is not just clicking an endless stream of steady quarter notes. He's playing in a 16th note feel. You can hear that the first note of every group of 4 16th notes is accented. Have a listen.
Alright, now it's just like a billion times faster than that. Okay.
This makes it much easier to sync up his brain to his hands to his guitar and make everything sound good and tight when he plays. So there are 2 takeaway points for you here. First, when you're pushing your top end speed to the limit, then you want to set the metronome to quarter notes for all the reasons we already discussed. But if you're trying to make some horizontal progress at moderately fast tempos, and you're just trying to make your playing cleaner and more consistent at those moderate tempos, then you can adjust the tempo as needed and play one note per click if you so choose to work on your timing. Then it's totally fine. Just don't flip the 2 approaches together, because that's a big mistake. That's when your playing falls apart, and that's when it doesn't work. But even if you are playing one note per click, then at least set the metronome to click in a way that matches the rhythm of what you're playing. So if you're playing a 16th note lick, the metronome should accent the first click of every group of 4. If you're playing triplets, then it's the first click of every group of 3, and so on. Now have a look at this clip of John playing the Gift of Music solo at half speed. And what's unusual about this is that, assuming John is playing this right before a show, as I believe he is, it's kind of strange to hear him play the solo this slowly. I mean, if you're about to go on stage in a minute, wouldn't you be playing the solo at full speed, or at least at 90% of your speed, or better yet, at like 120% of your top speed, to have some reserve of speed to fall back on if something goes wrong on stage? Why is John practicing literally 180 degrees opposite of what common sense tells you should do? And I instantly see at least 3 reasons he'd be doing that. If you want to guess what those reasons are, pause this video and drop your best guess in the comments below, and then come back and I'll tell you what my answers are. And the first of these reasons is to work on his timing. Timing is everything in a band like Dream Theater, and this applies just as much to lead playing as it does to rhythm playing. Listen to any Petrucci solo and any Dream Theater record, and you can hear how tight the melody of the lead guitar is with the drums, with the rhythm guitar, with the bass, the whole thing. Playing in time is probably even more important for Petrucci than playing cleanly, because when he's playing a show, if he messes up the faster part that's not totally clean, the listener's ear probably fills in all the missing gaps anyway, because you probably heard the song a bunch of times and you know what notes are supposed to go in that part of the solo. But if the whole band plays out of time, then it sounds really bad, and it's really obvious that it sounds bad. So by playing the solo at half speed, Petrucci basically forces his brain and his hands to lock in tight with the metronome click, and it's incredibly obvious when something is not tight when you're playing that slowly. And even if you have no plans of ever playing guitar professionally, I bet your playing will still start to sound a lot better if you focus on the timing of the notes and not just on their speed and accuracy. The second reason I think John is playing the solo this slowly is to create what I call articulation anchor points for himself. Notice how hard he's picking the notes with his picking hand right here. What these articulation anchor points do is they help John to lock his hands back in sync if he ever loses his place or gets a little bit off track in the middle of a solo. He simply knows where the next articulation anchor point is, he hits it a little bit harder with the pick to get his hands back in sync, and boom, he's back in the saddle. This is a big trick to how professional players are able to play on stage consistently under various uncomfortable conditions and make very few mistakes. And you can of course use this whether you ever play on stage or not. Simply find spots in difficult passages or difficult solos where you can get your hands hands back in sync and accent those notes a little bit harder, and you'll be good to go. It's a very useful thing to practice. The other thing John is doing here by practicing the solo this slowly is he is taking each note through what I call an imperfections removal audit. By playing the solo this slowly, of course, each note rings out quite a bit longer than it would at full speed, and that gives John plenty of time to process how it sounds and refine it based on what I call his mental mastery checklist. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek name I came up with that explains how Petrucci and other great players get difficult to play licks under their fingers. And the good news is, once you understand what the checklist is, you can simply reverse engineer it and apply it into your practicing and get your difficult to play licks under your fingers much faster as well. If you want to know what this mastery checklist is that Petrucci and other great players use when they practice, watch this video on the screen next.